Brooklyn in the house. Yes. Whoa. Tonight's subject is on the topic of morality and all the ways that science might or might not inform our future judgments regarding it. And we have a panel specifically tuned for that purpose. People of high and low moral stature. Just let me first introduce a comedian, Michael Ian Black. Michael, come on out. Not only a comedian, an actor, a director. You've been seeing the Jim Gaffigan show. Comedy Central's Another Period. And Netflix, we had a Wet Summer.
Wet Hot American Summer.
Wet Hot American Summer. Close enough. Okay. I'd also like to introduce the founding editor and publisher of Skeptic magazine, Michael Shermer. Michael Shermer, come on out. Michael.
Hey, man.
Excellent.
All right. Thank you.
Michael Shermer is author of The Moral Arc: How Science and Reason Lead Humanity Towards Truth, Justice, and Freedom. Audacious of you to do such a thing. Who else do we have here? Because not all morality, perhaps, comes from rational thought. Perhaps it comes from religious thought. And we'll bring out Father James Martin, a Jesuit priest. Father Martin, come on out. Hello, Father.
Hello.
He's actually the best-selling author of A Jesus Pilgrimage. Did I get that name right? The name of that, is that right?
Jesus, a Pilgrimage, correct.
Jesus, a Pilgrimage. And most recently, Building a Bridge. And this is subtitled How the Catholic Church and the LGBT community can enter into a relationship of reflection, compassion, and sensitivity. Whoa! Where'd this come from?
Thank you.
Will you be excommunicated tomorrow for having done this?
Depends what I say tonight.
Okay. Excellent. How many seats we have left? One seat left. Join me in giving a warm Brooklyn welcome to Whoopi Goldberg. Whoopi! Where is she?
Hey.
All right, let's do this. StarTalk live, King's Theater, Brooklyn, in the house. So, Michael, this is not your first rodeo with books
My
on
third
morality.
third rodeo.
Third rodeo, okay. What is your sense of the origins of what is right and wrong? Do you have some thoughts about that?
I do. I think since you're a physicist and you have the best-selling physics book of all time, I'd start with physics.
For the moment.
I'm going to start with physics. The second law of thermodynamics, entropy, the universe is running down, everything dissolves, hot things get cold, organisms wear out, and so forth. So the second law of thermodynamics is the first law of life, which is to push back against entropy. That is to go up the energy gradient by doing things with your cells, by replicating, by flourishing, by consuming energy, and so forth. Okay, so the most selfish thing you could do would be to hoard all the resources you can. Be selfish. This selfish gene kind of thinking. But the problem with that is that if you live in a social community, everybody else who acts like that, it's not going to work. It's going to fall apart. If you're super selfish and I'm super selfish, and if we're just hoarding resources from each other, this is going to dissolve. So the most selfish thing I could do at times...
That could dissolve into war and death and bloodshed.
It's happened
simply into Ayn Rand novels.
Yes, that's a dystopian, Atlas Shrugged. It's true. Well, it's sort of a Hobbes, nasty, brutish, and short. So part of life is like that. But sometimes the most selfish thing you can do is to be cooperative, altruistic, helpful, nice, be a good friend, be a reliable, respectful person with a good reputation, because that way, when you help somebody when they're in need, when your time comes, when you need help, then they're more likely to help you. Now, it's not a cold calculation like I'm going to trick you into thinking I'm nice, and then I'm going to stab you in the back once I get your resources. No, because you'll know that I'm faking. Because our brains are fine-tuned to notice when people are lying, or people are dissembling, or where they're narcissistic in an inauthentic way. And so it's not enough to fake.
He's not talking about any.
No one here. No one here.
Our brains aren't fine-tuned enough to tell when someone's narcissistic.
It's those people in California. No, that's where I'm from. No. No, it's not enough to fake being a nice person. You actually have to be a nice person. And
not in my experience.
Okay.
You fake.
There's our one.
Yeah, okay.
We have picked out the psychopath on the panel. Okay. We found him. It's because it's about 3 out of 100 or so. Anyway, so my argument is that
3 out of 100?
No,
3 out of 100 people are psychopaths?
Yeah, about 3 out of 100. Well, men. 3 out of 100 men.
Sure. And then
I could have told you that.
Sorry. It's true. I'm sorry to say.
Okay, so you're describing something that is evolutionarily pre-selected for our own survival.
That's right. So it's not enough to fake being a good person. You actually have to feel it. You have to have the genuine moral emotions of wanting to help and feeling good about that. Now, it's not to say that human nature is we're all good, because we have a dark side. We have our inner demons and our better angels in competition. So the whole point of structuring a civil society in a way is to nudge the incentives to get people to be nicer and knock back those super selfish tendencies. And it's a constant tug and pull of what we should do in this particular community or society or whatever to get people to be nicer.
So you're saying to be moral is for our own collective survival.
Yes.
And that is sort of self-selecting.
And your survival. I mean, it's better for you. Okay, you maybe can benefit by being super selfish and betraying your friends and so on. Yes, those people can get away with it. But if too many of us act like that, the whole system falls apart. So we've evolved the propensity where most people, most of the time, are nice.
Wait, so what number, like in a culture, like in a society, what's the number of like assholes it can handle?
Yes, that's right.
The threshold.
Yeah, what's the asshole threshold?
It's about, really, there's studies on this. It's about 20%. About 20%.
20%?
Well, if you go out from, the backstabbing psychopaths out to just the not so nice
someone
assholes.
will eat your donut when you turn around.
Yeah. That's about like 1 out of 5. But those people, most of those 20% are reformable. You can, in other words, if you put a mirror in front of the donut stand there at the company.
Then there's 2 donuts!
Okay. That's very good.
Yeah, you're right about it. Yeah.
What's the physics of that with the...
Wait, so Father... Father, Jesuit Father...
Another big laugh line.
First, this is not your first time on StarTalk.
I am very happy to be back.
You came back. Thank you for coming back.
Thank you for inviting me.
Okay. Yes. And earlier we wanted to get cozy with you. Call you Jesuit James. That kind of sound like Jesse James, Jesuit James.
Whatever you want. It's your show.
So, if you can first speak more broadly about religion, certainly as manifested in modern American society, and then perhaps more specifically from the view of Catholicism, does what Michael said, is that embraced as something that God knows about and put in place, or do you require some other deeper infusion of understanding of morality in religious thought?
That's a great way of asking the question. A lot of what Michael says makes sense to me and is accepted. And certainly science and faith, there's no sort of conflict, I think, at least as a for a Catholic. For example, the idea that we would have certain emotions that would lead us to do good things, I would definitely agree with that, and that those emotions will ultimately lead to the common good, we would say in the Catholic Church. I think the added gloss I would put on that is that for us, for a religious person, those notions and those emotions come from God. And so I also agree that there are these different forces pulling us apart and pulling in different ways, and we all know that. We have sort of selfish and selfless desires, and we can feel that tug of war. And what I would say is that the desire to do good is really God's voice within you, right? I mean, you don't hear voices, but you feel this desire to do something good, and that's one way that you have of helping other people and, in a sense, carrying out God's will. So and what is that called? That's called your conscience, basically. And so that's how I see it, that the moral law is spoken to us through our conscience, and then, through reflection throughout thousands of years of history, we have given voice to that, in terms of laws and the Bible and things like that. The Ten Commandments are kind of an expression of that for that culture back then. So I would agree with a lot of that.
Okay, but so what I'm curious about here is there are many people who are not moral. So would you say that all the people who are not moral, and which would include everyone who is justifiably in prison, they as a community are without God? That's what I'd be forced to conclude that based on your statement. So that you cannot say this moral imperative is put into everyone by God. It is put into some people and not others by God.
Well, I would say that actually God is with everyone, right? But
apparently not those in prison who committed multiple murders.
Well, there may be their bad guy inside just won over their God conscience. Just throwing out ideas.
No, I mean...
You helping him out
I'll
here?
leave it up to Jesuit Jim to tell us if it's true.
We also have free choice. God gives us free will, and so those people in jail who I still think God is with, and have consciences and souls, and God loves them.
You don't think some of them God just likes?
You know what? Actually, I think God likes them more.
Oh. That's
I do.
Very
I think
sweet.
No, because that's true. If you think about, for the Christian, who does Jesus go to? Jesus goes to the people who are seen as, in the society, sinful or on the outs. And who is more on the outs than an inmate on death row? Right? Who is more forgotten? And so I would say that this is the person who God kind of goes out to first.
And
but I would
the Nazis. God also loves the Nazis. They're people don't
Both
like them.
sides.
People hate them.
They are, to quote James, on the outs.
Yeah, they're on the outs.
Oh, yeah.
It's almost 2020 and everyone is looking at everything on their cell phones. You need your website to be perfect on any mobile device, and Wix automatically formats everything for mobile, even lets you refine it for a perfect experience.
How cool is that?
Head to the link in the description and start your site today. That's wix.com/go/StarTalk. La la la. Okay, forget it.
So Whoopi,
Yes?
you've been.
I'm on the outs with everybody. All the time.
First, let me be a fanboy here for a minute.
Oh.
You're one of a dozen living humans who have won the Grammy, the Emmy, the Oscar, and the Tony Award.
And still I work every day.
Still you work.
Still I work every day. It's a wonderful thing, but you still got to get up and go to work and dance for your food.
So I just fanboying a little bit there. So you've led what I have judged to be a very real, even raw life, absorbing reality and manifesting that in the decisions you make for a greater good. Where does your morality come from? How do you decide what's right or wrong?
Well, I judge it by my mother.
Oh, okay.
Because my mom pretty much said, look, you can go over there and rip those people off, but you can't be surprised when they beat you to death with a baseball bat. Now, you can go and do it. You can still do it. But you have to take responsibility for your choice, which is what you're talking about. If you subscribe to some religious thought, the idea is that God is basically saying, listen, I'm not going to do for you. I'll be here if you need me, but I'm not going to do for you. Now, not everybody wants to hear that. Because you hear first the story, God got pissed at Gomorrah. Look what happened.
Yeah,
right?
Old Testament, there's a lot of getting pissed
there's
off.
a lot of smiting and shit. It's just...
Yeah.
Sorry, Father.
Yeah.
He's here to forgive us all at the end of the night.
Yes.
Feel free.
But
Blanket forgiveness for all this.
It depends on which book there's so many religions and so many ideas. So you have to, at some point, make a decision. What's going to work for you? Now sometimes people end up killing people. They don't mean to, but they did. Does that make them a godless person? I don't know.
We'll have to ask Dick Cheney.
So Michael,
I didn't do it.
back in 2004, you wrote a book called The Science of Good and Evil.
Yeah.
Why people cheat, gossip, care, share, and follow the golden rule.
Yeah.
So...
Clicks, right? It's for clicks?
Yeah, that works. But I'm just trying to get to the bottom of this. You spent the opening remarks saying that there's a force in our culture that leads people to be honest and moral.
Well, in our nature.
In our nature, fine.
Yeah.
So whether that was sort of genetically inbred, evolutionarily, or imparted by God, the point is, it is clear that not everybody behaves this way.
Yeah.
So let me hear a little bit more about that 20% that can percolate up, because in every office environment, we know people who lie, steal, cheat.
Yes.
And
they take the paper clips. They don't pay for the donut. But the point of the mirror was, if you put a mirror in front of them, they're more likely to pay for the donut. They see themselves, and that reflects literally their conscience. So what you're doing with the mirror is reminding them, like Whoopi's mother, don't forget to be a good girl. Okay. And so think of the moral sense like a language. We all evolved the capacity to learn a language, everybody. Which language you learn depends on which culture you grow up in. So think of like a moral sense. Moral emotions are like a language. We all get it just by dint of being human. Which thing, like the capacity to feel guilt, everybody can feel guilt.
Not everybody.
Except the 3%. Except for the 3%. Yeah, they're guiltless, but most of us. Now, what you feel guilty about specifically depends on your culture. Now, Catholics feel guilty about certain things that Protestants don't feel guilty about, or Buddhists
Catholics
don't
feel
feel
guilty about
everything. Yes.
Right? Am I approximately correct there?
Not this Catholic.
Okay. Do you feel guilty about your predecessors prosecuting Galileo?
Yes, I do.
Good. Okay. Just had to get that off my chest.
Yeah.
People.
Well, you took it all the way back, huh?
I took it all.
That was all the way back in the day.
In the day.
Galileo.
Jesuit priest.
There you go.
But it wasn't until 1992 that the Pope forgave Galileo back in early 1600s. So religion does change.
I'm still not over it.
So, Michael, what of the people who are not just simply passively or opportunistically cheaters, the people who are presumably not only in the 3%, who are actively aggressive?
Yes.
Huge armies sent to lay waste. Onto what are declared enemies.
Yeah. So the myth is that the myth is that they're not moral. In fact, they're overly moral. They're uber moral. Most homicides, the majority of homicides, are moralistic in nature. They're not instrumental, where I killed him to take his Rolex or his car. No, it's the bastard scratched my car. He insulted me in front of my girlfriend. He cheated at cards. That's why mostly men.
He cheated at cards?
Yeah. Oh, this used to be a thing in the Wild West. Yeah.
Smith & Wesson beats 4 aces.
So I mean, there are studies of all these guys on death row. Like I've studied the database in the state of Texas. They've executed 545 people since 1982.
And only 2 were guilty.
Was it?
I said, and only 2 were guilty.
Yeah, well, a lot of them are, so probably a good 10 to 15% didn't do it. But a lot of them did do it. And when you ask them, why'd you do it, they don't say, because I'm a bastard or an asshole. It's like, well, the guy cheated, she cheated on me, or he stole my car, or insulted me in front of my girlfriend, this kind of thing. In other words, the murderer acts as in a form of self-help justice as judge, jury, and executioner in one shot.
Can I ask a question? It seems like what you're saying is morality is a narrative we tell ourselves to justify our actions. So to flip that around, you would then say that Texas, the state, is acting morally by killing these people, and therefore, if you extrapolate further, any state or nation, which is basically what you said, tells themselves the narrative of they are acting morally to commit genocide.
That's right.
So but as stepping back from that, we go, well, that's not moral behavior. So so then it seems like morality can be anything you say it is, as long as you tell yourself you're doing the right thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
Great joke, Michael.
he's hilarious.
These psychopaths, they have their moments, you know.
Okay, so here's what happens with this. Here's the problem. Because there are bullies.
The problem is people are killing each other. That's the problem.
Yes. Okay, so because of this 20% or so of free riders, bullies, assholes, you have to stand up and fight back. You got to just slap this guy back. You have to develop a reputation. You don't spit into the wind. You don't, take, and so forth. You gotta fight back, and that's the one way. Like your mom said, if you go steal that, they're gonna punch you.
Well,
okay,
she said
maybe I
she'd
better not do it. So
kill her with a bat. And I believe she was talking about robbing a baseball team.
I grew up in New York.
Individuals all the way up to groups, to states, to nations, develop this belief that comes from nature. Like you got to fight back, you got to stand up to bullies and free riders and people that steal your stuff. You got to stop them. All right, so then this ends up getting into this sort of just war theory. When is it okay to go to war? And the problem is exactly what you said. There's a new database I've just been reading about in this book called The Internationalist. 500 war statements by nations. This is why we're going to war. It's 500 different versions of why we should kill these people and take their stuff. And it's all rationalization. So everybody that commits a crime or an immoral act or whatever, they don't think they're doing that. They think they're doing good. But what's happened over the centuries is that we've been adjusting that rationalization to be less and less, hopefully violent, aggressive, justified violence, and more toward international courts, the UN, The Hague, all these kinds of international laws that say, and this really is just the last 50 years, you can't do that anymore. War is illegal. And so to get around it, because you've noticed people have gotten around that over the last 50 years, but the idea is first you outlaw it, like slavery, you outlaw it. Now it still goes on, but then you enforce the law, and eventually it stops, and then we stop thinking about it as an option.
Except that, that sounds really great, but people get really pissed off when they lose a war.
Yes,
they can't let it go.
Well, if you think about Germany and Japan.
I'm thinking about the U.S.
Oh. You're talking about us?
Civil War. And people can't let it go. We're dealing with statues that were put up in the 50s.
Yes. Well, this is a perfect example of the adjustment of our sensibilities. These used to be heroes, these martial statues honoring military men. That's just not cool anymore, and that's good.
No. The statues that have gone up were of the guys who actually broke the law. They were a lot of those statues that went up were. What happened?
He said traitors.
Okay, they were all right. They were traitors.
We'll take care of it. Thank you, sir. We all.
Well, let me ask. Is there any sense that other animals have any sense of morality?
Oh, they
do. Is it a purely
yes.
human thing?
Oh, no.
Other than penguins.
That's right.
The most moral animal in the world.
That's what we need, another penguin movie. Yeah, we didn't have enough. Yeah.
We know that chimps and bonobos fight a lot, and then they have make-up sex afterwards. So it's usually the females that break up the fights and smooth things over. They have all kinds of behavioral ways of calming things down after hostile interactions. We know that we've seen dolphins and whales like push their wounded brothers and sisters up to get air. We know that elephants grieve. You can see dogs that feel guilt.
Grieve.
They
What
grieve.
kind of dogs that feel guilt, like if
Well-
they eat too many snacks, or they like?
Yeah, they steal your stuff, and they, you know,
Yeah.
you come in and go, hey, and they go, the tail goes down. You know.
But is that guilt or is that
I'll tell you-
fear of punishment? Or are those two distinguishable?
I was visiting some folks' house, and we left some cheese on the table and went out for an hour and came back, and the cheese was gone. It was a big slab of cheese. And we said, where'd the cheese go? No one knew. And then we all looked at the dog. Just looked at the dog. And the dog cowered and went behind. We didn't even say anything.
But if you did that...
Wait, you didn't even use language?
But
Yeah.
guilt implies the ability to correct. If
yeah.
you did that 100 times, that dog would eat that fucking cheese 100 times.
Until he tried to poop.
Is God in a thieving dog soul?
Well, there's a famous experiment by Franz de Waal at Emory University with two capuchin monkeys in side-by-side.
What kind of monkey?
Capuchin monkeys.
What is that?
Oh,
They're
like
little tiny ones.
brain.
Cute little,
They're like
like
sort of-
that.
Yeah. They're like just anyway. They're like.
Am I the
baboons,
only
whatever.
one who didn't know what a capuchin monkey was?
I didn't know, but I felt like you
Just
had
think
already
of a
gotten to the
tiny
question.
brain little monkey, just tiny, like 20 pounds. And
Okay.
so, anyway, so there's two of them side by side in this cage, translucent wall, they can see each other. And they've been trained to give a pebble to the experimenter who gives them a piece of food in exchange. So they just learn to associate that. So the pebbles are like money for exchange, all right? So in comes the experimenter. You can watch this on YouTube. It's quite hilarious. So she gives him a pebble, and he gives it back to her, and she gives him a cucumber slice, and he's all excited, oh boy, and he eats his cucumber slices. They like cucumbers. Then the other one does the same thing, and she gives him a grape. Now, they like grapes even more because, who doesn't? And so, but the first one now sees that this one got a grape, and he's very excited, like, oh boy, I'm gonna get a grape. And he gives the pebble to her, and she hands him a cucumber, and he goes, boom, like this. And then he's like pounding on the cage and rattling the cage while he is pissed. He can clearly see, I did the same amount of work as that guy, and he got paid twice as much and that is not cool.
Whoa. So that's
Now, they don't have language. They can't say, I hereby protest and I'm going to unionize.
Yeah, but they got poop.
Yeah.
They throw it right
Yeah,
at
wait,
you.
what kind of monkey is it again?
Capuchin.
Is there a capuchin Bernie Sanders?
That's right. We're going to smooth out the income. Yes, okay.
so interesting. So this is the frustration felt by not being compensated for the same work.
Exactly. Right. It's there. And we are evolutionarily separated from these capuchins by about 30 million years. So this goes way back in mammals. So it's a social mammals that you have to have a sense of right and wrong in order to get along with your other fellow group members.
So Father, does the Catholic Church have some definition of or operational discussion, a way to describe what is judged as pure evil?
Well, evil in general is what distances you from God, or an act that itself distances you from God, and it's contrary to what we would say would be the moral law.
Yeah,
but there's different kinds of evil too.
So all right, so I'll grant
Sure.
that, but historically, what we may have judged to be evil has evolved.
Right.
So there are people, not blaming you for this, but we can say without hesitation, there are many people who justified slavery as the moral thing to do to help out the African savages, okay? As a moral imperative. And now that is it's not viewed in that context. So something is evolving a sense of morality and judging what is evil and what it isn't. What is that? Wait, what are you doing? What's the matter?
Well, I never heard that explanation.
Oh!
I always thought it was like, look, we can get them cheap. And they went and grabbed people, which makes it immoral.
Are you a descendant of Ham? Your skin is darkened and you are cursed. And so this is in Christianity.
Well, but
sects
it's
of Christianity.
But so when does the moral compass stop? because there's...
Or is it always in flux?
Well, depends, doesn't it?
That's what I'm asking.
Well, you would hope that it's always evolving and that it's always improving. That, as the community reflects on what is good and what is bad, that we have a greater sense, as one gets when one ages, right, or gets older. And so we see that that's clearly immoral now and evil, which you're right, they didn't see that back in the day. And also, that was in the Bible. You had slaves in the Bible, you have slaves in the New Testament, and so they not only looked at it as, kind of justifiable, but something that's in Scripture. And so now with more...
Not only that, not from my read of Scripture, there is no indictment of the possession of slaves. So it's not even just a neutral thing. There's not even any negative statements about it.
Right. And so the question is, to your point, Michael, about how do we discern and how do we develop? I think as an individual can develop a sense of right and wrong and kind of deepen it, right, as you get more mature and understand more about the world. I think a community can do that too, right? And so a community can look at a statue and say, there's this person who now we no longer want to honor, right? Because we are developing our sense of morality.
But if this is laid down by God, shouldn't it be an eternal truth? If you went to heaven and you had slaves, and then you were like, I was a great person, I had these slaves, and that was the moral thing to do, and then 100 years later, people are like, you shouldn't have slaves, does that person get kicked out of heaven?
Yes.
No, and that's a very important question. I mean, how much of, and I don't have an easy answer to that, how much of morality is culturally conditioned and is also conditioned in the time that you live? And I sometimes wonder, what are the things that we are doing today that 100 or 500 years from now will be seen as, unbelievably immoral, that
Animals.
we're fine with? Well, I sometimes think that,
Candy
animals,
corn.
Well, I think we can all agree on that.
The cultural change, though, is not random. It's not just cultures are just bouncing around believing different things. It's moving in a certain direction. The arc is bending towards justice. Thank you, Neil. Available at fine bookstores everywhere.
Yes.
That is to say, the moral sphere is expanding to include more people as equal under the law, under rights, under treatment, dignity, respect, and so on, such that that more and more we are tending to think of people that are different from us, whoever that is, are equal to us. And that's what's been changing. It's taken centuries to do it, but it's slowly, gradually getting. So civil rights, women's rights, gay rights, animal rights.
In that sequence,
that's right.
That's how that unfolded.
And so Father coming out in defending LGBTQ rights is a big step, because somebody on your team that comes out and says, we are going to treat these people equally, whatever your argument is, God created them all equally, I don't care. That's good. That's part of the step to one more step. And
the moral arc.
The moral arc. We're getting there.
This is StarTalk Live from King's Theater, Brooklyn, New York. Woo! We are talking about the science of morality. So, Michael, can science inform or even determine human values? If that's the case, that's opposite or very different from what so many people have learned or been taught throughout their lives. You attend some religious service, and most people's understanding who are religious is that your morality comes from God. And so, it seems like you're not even going there. You've got other explanations for this. So how is it that facts that drive science can inform values, which are the products of our feelings and of society that we create?
Yeah, so this is the hard problem. Almost all scientists and philosophers say you can't. And they always turn to the great philosopher David Hume, who said you can't derive an ought from an is. This is the way nature is. That doesn't mean it ought to be this way. We can change it. Okay.
In other words, scientists can describe nature,
right,
but not use science to inform how nature ought to be.
That's right.
Okay.
So I would like to challenge that a little bit in this sense. Just think about, say, mathematics or physics. Again, we'll go back to that. If you're doing your calculations correctly, there are certain things you will find out that are more likely to be true than other things. So say Kepler discovering that planets travel in elliptical orbits rather than circles. Given that he was doing his calculations correctly and planets really do travel in ellipses, he could hardly have discovered anything else. Okay. So this is true in biology. Had Darwin not discovered the theory of natural selection as the mechanism of evolution. Somebody else would. In fact, somebody else did, Alfred Russel Wallace. And then, so I would say the same thing with the moral sense. What we've been doing for centuries is discovering that there's certain ways of structuring a society, a community of people that live together, that are more harmonious to our collective and individual well-being, our survival and flourishing as sentient beings.
You're saying we're discovering a pre-existing fact.
That are there in nature. It's there in our nature. We desire to be free, to be autonomous, to be treated equally. That is, for me to convince you to be nice to me, I have to appeal to your sense that I will be nice to you back. This is the golden rule. This is the kind of thing that's been discovered over
Whoopi, what?
I think I don't understand what you're saying because...
That means she doesn't understand. Well, yeah, she's polite. Okay, Whoopi, go.
Because if it is in fact morally in us, because of science, to do and make these decisions, why is it that it hasn't morally been we haven't morally been able to treat women equal to men? We haven't been able to, if it's a science, if it's in there and it's in our DNA.
Why is it so hard to do that?
That's what I'm asking.
Okay, good question.
Yeah.
My answer is that 2017 is the best year in the history of human civilization for women. It's never been this good. It's got a long ways to go.
Oh, you about to get, I wouldn't say that. I might
Look, I don't
walk that back a little bit.
Wait, let me...
You wouldn't put it at 2015 or so?
Wait, I got this. If you were female or if you were black and you walked into a time machine, is there any time in the past where you would say, yeah, things were better than today?
But Neil,
Is there? Give me a year where that was the case.
I can't give you the year, but I'll tell you, Egypt seemed a lot more interesting when Cleopatra was running shit. Okay. I'm just saying. She seemed to have it together, and you know.
Yeah, but then I guess, Jews wouldn't go back.
That's right. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
Very few
Jewish
people had it
women
good
would
in
go
those
back
days.
and change shit around and make it work. See, if women ran things, we would actually, I believe, if women actually ran things, we could help men adjust to a lot of things.
Okay, typical woman.
Oh no, a typical woman would be much nicer about it. But
let me get back to a time that we generally think of as the scientific revolution, after the scientific method was advanced by Galileo, Francis Bacon, and the Enlightenment that generally we think of in Europe, where science flourished, culture flourished, art flourished. There were wars and things and the rest of that, but that kind of has always been happening. The rest of this was different. And there was great cathedral building, church building over that time. Would you say that over that time, there was moral progress?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, just
What
think
are
about
some examples?
Okay, abolition of slavery, abolition of torture, abolition of capital punishment, except for the United States. Civil rights, women's rights, gay rights, these things have all happened.
Go back to...
Well, okay, so it begins with the idea that the universe is discoverable and it's governed by natural principles and laws that we can understand. That starts with the physical sciences, into the biological sciences, into the social sciences. The idea that a society, a political system, is a system we can study and look at it and go, look, these systems are better than these over here. Democracies are objectively better than dictatorships and theocracies by every measure. And this is my point. These are experiments.
Just to be clear, objectively better would mean it spreads happiness more...
Well-being, survival, flourishing, rights, all that stuff. Okay, our mutual friend, the late, great Carl Sagan, has a great chapter in The Demon-Haunted World on these kinds of experiments. We have 50 different states with 50 different laws, constitutions, different gun control laws, different alcohol laws, and so on. These are experiments, and we can look and go.
Social experiments.
Social experiments. So this is called the comparative method of natural experiments. You can't control the variables in a lab, but we can look at what happened. So just go back to 1970s Korea. So North and South Korea are divided. In the early 70s, they split economically and politically. One went super dictatorship, the other liberal democracy. You can see the difference from space. One is dark and impoverished. The other one is light and enlightened. The South Koreans are 5 inches taller than North Koreans. Okay, so a liberal democracy is objectively better than a dictatorship. That we can measure and say with confidence, and not just democracies, but all these other concepts of like civil rights and civil liberties. Just ask the people that are affected: would you rather live in which you are treated equally under the law or not? Of course, people say, yes, I want to be treated equally. Okay, when is that? It's not perfect. So if our metric is it has to be perfect, we're not there, and we're never going to be in utopia. But it's better than it was last year, better than it was 20 years ago, better than a century ago, and so on. Your time machine. Overall, on average. On average.
So, Father, is there, what do you see as the... Okay, Whoopi, what?
I'm just going to say it again. You know, if you go back and trace, when you're talking about science, female scientists in Galileo's time were not, they were burned as heretics. Yeah. And women...
Well, witches. They had powers, yeah.
Witches.
Yeah.
See, the H word is because I was talking to you. But I just think to myself, yeah, lots of things have changed, but some things have taken an inordinately long time in doing. And education for people who are not wealthy, for women. I mean, science and all of these things you all are talking about are things that kept women out.
Wait. So let me add something to what she said. Now
yes.
I want to back up my woman here, okay?
Sorry.
If what you guys are saying is true, it shouldn't have required centuries of bloodshed to get to the bits of equality that we have today. It should have flowed naturally. Martin Luther King would have had to march on Washington. You wouldn't have had to have all the women's demonstrations. You wouldn't have had to have the gay rights movement, because it would have just been natural for people to think of equality that way. And the fact that it has been so delayed, thousands of years of history, argues against your thesis, and Father, your thesis, that this is somehow deeply within us and that it is an inevitable consequence of being rational.
No, but can I respond?
Okay. Did I get your back?
Yes.
I think that's a very important question, but I also think that it is deeply within us, but it is also deeply within us to choose the wrong thing. I mean, I mean, it's a word that's not popular, but we are sinful people in many ways, and we have, subjugated people. A lot of it is about power. We have been selfish. We have been selfish as community towards another community. So yeah, it's taken a ridiculously long time to get to a place of women's rights and African-American rights and LGBT rights, because, we are, as you were saying at the beginning, there are those conflicting forces that we see, I would say, on a small scale within us. You struggle with selfish and selfless, as the society does. I also think a lot of it has to do not only with power, but we were talking about that statue of Teddy Roosevelt in front of the Natural History Museum, who we see as other, right? Who is the other, right? And as we understand more and more people as ourselves, right? There's no us and them, there's just us. Then we can come to understand what their needs are. And yeah, it's terrible it's taken so long, but I think that's a lot of that is human nature and our own, terrible sinfulness.
But also morality is deep in there. This book, trying to put an olive branch out between the Catholic Church and LGBT community, I would say most of the nation's resistance to the equality of that community, if you part the curtains, has religious foundation.
That is absolutely right.
Okay, so they are making a moral judgment on people's private lives.
Right, and so one of the things
this is what put you on the shit list of the right-wing conservative Christian right.
Right.
Yeah, but in 20 years, you wouldn't be on the shit list because no one's going to be
They'll all be gay. An army of fuckable conservatives.
Yeah, and so that
Okay, let me
and
make
so the
another
challenge for people is to be able to see, in my case in the Catholic Church, LGBT people not as other anymore, not as the them, but as the us.
That's why you wrote this book.
Yeah, and part of it is this is what Jesus does in the Gospels. Jesus is always going out to people on the margins, right? The Roman centurion.
Margins of the day.
Exactly, right? Which were different than the margins of our time. And he's getting, to use a theological term, he gets shit for it too. So, and I think that.
But think about how fast this has happened for the gay community versus, say, women, African American, slavery, death penalty, and so on, which took centuries to change. The equal marriage, laws and all that changed pretty quick once it started cascading. In other words, there's kind of an acceleration as one moral movement uses the techniques and methods and strategies of the previous moral revolution, because they know they can see what works. So like when Martin Luther King Jr. did his marches and so on, these were calculated to do certain things to change the laws, and subsequent generations of moral crusaders can look and see what worked. Now let's try that. It turns out violence doesn't work. Almost never works.
Father, you make an argument about a two-way bridge. Could you describe that from your book?
Yeah, so I say that there are two groups. There's the institutional church, which is the hierarchy and the bishops and anyone who works in any sort of official capacity in the church, including lay people who would run schools, women and men. And there's the LGBT. In this book, it's very sort of specific, the LGBT Catholic community. And the onus is on the institutional church to reach out to the LGBT community, because it is the institutional church that has marginalized the LGBT Catholic. But it is a two-way bridge, because the LGBT community, has to kind of, enter into a dialogue as well, even though it's more difficult, because they're the marginalized ones. And so it's an attempt to try to build a bridge between those two groups, and it, frankly, just to start the conversation. And it's a difficult conversation, as since I'm on the shit list. But the point is, it's.
Again,
I would say this. I think your point is a good one, Michael. That it is up to the religious person to stand for the other. At least in the Christian point of view, it is up for the Jesus always takes the side. Desmond Tutu said the simplest way: God sides with the outsiders. Period. Right? And so it's actually up to religion, which unfortunately has been used against the outsiders, as an excuse, right? And
but the only time in history that's happened.
What's that?
Sorry, I said the only time in history that's happened.
Well, no, but for example, you look at the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King, who comes out of this Christian tradition, right? And who uses his Christian background.
Dr. King's mentor, his sort of role models were Gandhi and nonviolent social change, because nonviolence works faster and better than violence to bring about social change. And that itself has progressed over the last half century. So let me make one final statement that'll bring a heap of hate on me, just because I don't have enough tonight. Conservatives today are more socially liberal than liberals were in the 1950s.
Yeah, that's probably right. Yeah.
Just think about how people talked about Jews and blacks and women in the 1950s than now. Yeah. So we've all okay. I know we're not there yet, but
No.
but we've all shifted. That the whole moral zeitgeist has shifted through 1,000 different little avenues.
Even today you can hook up in a car and nobody would care. In the 50s, you were judged.
Yeah.
That's right. Yes.
If it's a Kia, I'm still judging.
This is StarTalk Live from King's Theater, Brooklyn, New York. Woo! We are talking about the science of morality with best-selling author Michael Shermer, lately author of The Moral Arc. He's also publisher and editor, I guess, editor-in-chief of Skeptic's magazine.
I doubt it.
Oh man, I've never heard that one.
Still enjoyable, though.
We're with Father James Martin. He's a Jesuit priest, his second time on StarTalk. We love him to death. We have a special guest appearance with Whoopi Goldberg. Whoopi, thanks for coming out for this.
Wow. Yeah.
We got Michael Ian Black. Michael, thanks.
Yep.
And also Eugene Mirman. Eugene! So Eugene, I have a one-line bio for you in my notes here. It says, you're the voice of Gene Belcher in Bob's Burgers. And I thought, surely there's more on his resume than that. But we'll accept the one-liner as a... Then I realized this is part of the Eugene Mirman Comedy Festival. So that's a whole thing with his name. So Eugene, thanks for keeping comedy. I don't know whether life would be bearable without the legions of comedians you bring to bear on all of society's challenges. So thanks for that.
Thank you. Thank you, Neil.
It's probably safe to say we're the real heroes.
Yeah. Yes.
So in your book, you have a chapter on LGBT rights. Can you comment on if science has anything to say about that?
Well, okay, so first, at the very least, if the science informs us that it's not a choice, you're just born that way, that tells us that condemning it as a wrong choice is itself wrong. And so that at least gets us a step in the right direction. If we know something about biology and embryology and hormones and so on, and so there's this great spectrum in sexual choices and preferences, and so not choices, preferences. That's why we use that word. It's just how it is. So, or orientation. Then we can at least be more respectful. So, in the book I talk about the witch theory of causality. If you believe that burning women at the stake for cavorting with demons in the middle of the night as an explanation for storms and diseases and plagues, then you're either insane or you lived 500 years ago. Now, nobody burns women as witches in the West anyway. It's very rare elsewhere. And so we've been debunking essentially wrong ideas, mainly science. That blacks are inferior, that women can't run companies and countries. These are wrong ideas, that Jews poisoned the wells or caused the plague or the stab in the back in the First World War. These are all wrong ideas, and we debunk them to the point where no one even talks about it anymore. You don't even think about it. These are crazy ideas. And so...
No, I don't poison wells, if that was the question.
So Whoopi, You've had some LGBT activism in your day.
Yes, I have.
And so here is someone who has been active and can comment on the success or failure rate of these efforts.
Well, what's interesting is that what you're saying about science and what science knows and has been hesitant to say definitively, this is why you're wrong. Science hasn't come out and actively fought the prejudice people have. And in part, you're catching a lot of shit because when people think religion, there are religious things. People keep pointing to things in the Bible saying, well, it says man shall not lie with man. Well, I always tell people at my shows, have you read Isaiah? Have you read the rest of it? Because one of them is, any man who has sex with an animal shall be put to death, but so shall the animal. My question, what did the animal do? You know what I mean? Anyone who curses their parents shall be put to death.
Yeah.
Half the room is gone.
Mm-hmm.
It's so...
Adultery, too.
You have this idea of what is moral and what is religiously moral and what is scientifically moral, and trying to get the two to reconcile seems to be difficult. Because you just said, as science knows, it isn't a choice. You are born this way. I was talking... and I explain I often get into trouble because I say, well, if you believe in the Bible, you believe in Adam and Eve, You say, well, what happened? God said, hey, Adam, what's up? Adam would say, hey, I don't know, I'm feeling some kind of way.
That was the black God. What's up, Adam? Yeah, what'd it be like? Yeah, right on.
That's the TV black God.
Very good.
God says, I know what's wrong. You need some company. If you believe, okay? What is it? Adam says. God says, take a deep breath. This is going to hurt. Goes in, gets a rib, pulls it out of the man Adam, and structures a female, which says to me that God, if you believe in God and you believe in the Bible, gave us a sexual duality in us. So if you believe in God, this is God-given. This is God-given. So I say this in my shows, and people freak out. They say that's not what God did. That's not God. So I don't know how to get both ends to stand up for a community that desperately needs both your help.
Yeah, very important point.
Okay, thank you.
Just to sort of still hit that, but move it a little further, it's not only the LGBT community and the woman within the man within the woman. There's also lots of dialogue about whether contraception is immoral, especially from the Catholic Church, and also abortion. Now, here's what's interesting to me. I have conversations with my wife about this often. So you have generally the people who are anti-abortion. If you part the curtains, there's a religious foundation for their argument. But in principle, you could make a non-killing another human argument without reference to God, because thou shalt not kill is the one of the 10 Commandments that's made it into secular law. So the rest, nobody really.
Well, stealing.
Yeah.
Sure. There you go.
Sure, but graven images and stuff.
Right.
Yeah, that was very in its day.
Yeah.
Right, that was a thing. But
Just to be clear, I'm currently having sex with my neighbor's wife. That's cool legally, right? Legally speaking, I'm fine.
No,
frowned upon.
Covet your neighbor's
it
ass.
may be morally wrong, but you won't go to jail for it.
Okay,
That's the
good.
point. So what I want to understand here is there's a moral judgment placed coming from a religious community on abortion, yet one can say you are killing a living human being, whether or not it's yet sentient or viable, and you can say that the woman's body is her own. So all of these for her to choose. So all of these have arguments, some of them more religiously conceived than others. Can you now project into the future where morality will land on that spectrum?
Well, we're about to go to the break, and Neil wants to resolve the abortion issue. Yes, in 30 seconds or less.
Are you going to invoke science to inform
Well,
this?
you can invoke. Okay, you can look at the trends, which has been more and more toward the autonomy and liberty of individuals to make their own decisions. So the abortion case is a special one in this case because, the fetus is at least a potential human, but a higher moral principle is that the women should be free to choose because of a whole host of historical reasons, and that there's certain moral values that are higher than others.
But you're making a moral judgment by saying the woman has the higher moral principle.
Yeah, well, so what I'm invoking is the historical tendency for liberal democracies to give more people more rights in more areas of life over time. And so
that's
women,
again, we're back to the arc.
The arc. So women having reproductive control over their choices is a step in the right direction, because for thousands of years, men have lorded it over women to make that choice for them, and that is a kind of slavery. It's a kind of controlling somebody else. So moving away from that. Now, admittedly, the abortion issue is complicated. You can be against abortion and pro-choice. You can say, I'm not going to do it, but I recognize your freedom to choose what you want to do.
Well, that's the gay marriage issue. So if you don't like gay marriage, then just don't get gay marriage.
Yeah, that's right. It's not a requirement.
Kind of, it's not. We're not requiring it of you for this to be to be the case.
Did you just kill my joke? You just stepped all up. No.
What I do?
If you don't believe in gay marriage, don't marry a gay person. That's the joke.
Oh.
Yeah. That is how you should have phrased it, Neil.
Go ahead.
So here's a point to those issues. Okay. Religion is clearly bringing a pre-existing foundation of moral judgment to these issues, clearly, okay? Recognizing, Father, as you've said candidly, that it can evolve as we go forward by discussion or analysis or whatever. If science, up till now, you've mentioned science only in the context of informing people about how they might make a decision, but at no time are you saying that the science itself is saying what is moral.
Well, I am saying that, actually. I haven't quite gotten
You haven't
yet.
said it like explicitly.
Yeah,
So if I ask you, if science has the power to shape morals, should it?
Well, yes.
Because wouldn't that then carry in, just the way different religions carry in to this table, wouldn't that carry in maybe the biases or preconceptions of the scientific community at that time? Go back when was the Tuskegee experiment?
40s.
In the 1940s.
30s and 40s.
With medical doctors giving out of
Syphilis.
Tuskegee Institute, not treating syphilis when they could have, leading the black men to believe that they were getting medication so that they can study the progress of the disease, yet not telling them. This is like a moral failure of the medical community who were conducting a scientific experiment.
But isn't that partially because the moral failure was not of the scientists, but of the time? Because these men were not seen as human beings,
That's right.
and that's
not. Yeah,
but if it's already in you, why didn't it become a moral decision?
Well, because again, we have the inner demons and the better angels, or the sinful nature. There's that other side, where, like as you put it, we can get them cheap. Well, there's plenty of people that are willing to go along with that and rationalize it with biblical arguments, or we're saving their souls for Christianity or whatever. But we don't think like that anymore, because we've debunked this idea that they actually like being slaves. No, they don't. You're wrong about that. Boom. Now, sometimes you got to fight. You got to pass the laws, fight the wars, whatever. But once you get there, what are the chances? Okay, slavery is illegal in every country in the world, all 192 countries. What are the chances that any of those countries would bring it back as a legal institution?
I don't even want to tell you this, but you would be shocked to find out how many countries are engaged in slavery.
Well, you mean
So the point here is, there's whatever the country says, and then there's what's happening.
That's right. Yeah, that's right.
As they turn a blind eye to it.
That's right.
Yeah.
The moral thing.
Right.
So how is
again,
that?
you got bad people that just want to exploit people. The point is having a law first and then enforce the law. These are mostly in countries where the governments are weak or corrupt and they can't enforce their laws. So anyway, a lot of this is...
Is there a place science should just stay out of in the moral fiber? And I might even ask the same of religion. If you have 10 different religions giving you 10 different moral interpretations of conduct, maybe none of them should be listened to, and we go to a secular analysis of it.
Yeah, I think there are plenty of places. We have separation of church and state, thank God in this country. There are plenty of places. No, truly. There are plenty of places where, religion, you are a moral person who is sort of informed by your religion, but there are plenty of times when religion does not need to be explicitly applied to a particular situation. Absolutely. And we have also seen times when religion has been applied, unjustly, or immorally. But I would say, I think the LGBT case is a good one in terms of how science informs us. So this idea that, which we now discard, I think most, reputable psychologists and psychiatrists, that it's a choice, right? So since people understand it as something that you are born, as Lady Gaga says, born that way, right?
Yeah.
No, it's true.
But she said born this way.
Thank you. Well,
Okay. Not that way, this way. Yeah.
I'm 56, so yeah. That, you know...
You get credit just for quoting Lady Gaga at all.
Thank you. That, you know, we understand that it is not, which we used to think, many people used to think, was a choice, and therefore a moral choice, right? And so therefore the person who chose that was immoral and bad, and so needed to be condemned. And so now, I mean, I think you're seeing this diminution of people, you know, who actually think that, and the majority understand, not only through their own experience with their families and people coming out, but thank God science, which actually I think is going to eradicate a lot of that prejudice, you know, or at least most of it that says that this is some sort of choice. And thank God. So, I mean, in a sense, that's where science can really inform. I think that's a great case where science can really inform, and we can see it in our lifetime, a moral choice.
Can I ask another very unfunny question? That's sort of what I do. I feel like what both of you are saying is that in terms of how morality developed, it seems like it has to do with scarcity of resources. That in order to propagate and make our species survive, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, we need to cooperate. And what you're saying, or what I understand morality to originate in biblical writings, is that it had to do with a similar thing, keeping the tribe safe, keeping people safe, learning how to cooperate for propagation and essentially harmony. Doesn't there come a point?
That's not what he said, but we'll keep going.
I'm not listening to what he said. I'm just saying what I understand.
Okay.
Doesn't there come a point, if everybody is harmonious and cooperating, that doesn't resources become more scarce, and doesn't that make us actually more likely to tip into entropy, leaning us back into the second law of thermodynamics?
Back to the physicist.
Yeah, isn't it too soon to say that, you know, World War II was 60 years ago. That's less than an eye blink. And that was the most devastating war in human history, right? So who are we to say that in 10 years, you know, it's not going to happen again? I mean, there's a lot of people who think we're going to war with China. They got 1 billion people there. That's going to suck.
Yeah, it's not. First of all, how are they going to get here?
Who?
The Chinese.
Zeppelins.
A billion Zeppelins.
Just like people feared in 1910.
I do want to make one small point. Even if it turned out that being gay was a choice, it's still not okay to oppress gay people, because there's a higher moral principle that you have autonomy and freedom over your body to choose whatever you want if no one else is harmed.
Okay, so to that point, I'm going to add punctuation, then I'm going to end this segment. If you hadn't made that point, I would have coming out of this segment. Because there's a point where...
And if you hadn't, I would have.
I think this is the easiest case to say this about, but there are probably other cases for which this applies. There are times where I would declare that the science is irrelevant. I was asked this from a magazine that served the gay community. They said, what's your stand on whether science shows that it is a choice or inbred? And I said, it doesn't matter what the science says. We live in a free country, or at least we tell ourselves we live in a free country. And for me, what consenting adults do is an expression of what it means to live in a free country, no matter whether science says that that's your choice or not. So you should not be waiting around for that scientific result and then grabbing it and putting it forward if it says it's not a choice. Because if the science happened to say it is a choice, then you're going to have to reject the science and say you need it on the principles of the founding fathers of this country. So that would be a case where if it's about human freedom, it's not about the science. It's about what we choose as a secular society.
But do we only live in a secular society?
Say what?
I said, but that would be so if we only lived in a secular society.
Yeah. So there's
You
still
know what I'm
issues.
saying.
I got you.
I'm just saying. You know.
That ends our second segment of StarTalk Live. Welcome back. StarTalk Live.
Woo!
Kings Theater, Brooklyn.
Woo! Yeah. Woo!
We're going to try to see if we can expand the moral sphere of this. And so let me ask you, Father, would you say that religion on the whole has helped, hindered, or been neutral to this arc of moral progress that Michael talks about?
Well, I would say, this is going to sound very Jesuitical, but
That's a word?
That is a word.
Jesuitical.
It is
cool,
a
I like
word.
it.
I'm using it tomorrow.
Yeah.
But it depends. Do you mean the way that people have actually lived religion, or do you mean actual religion? I mean, that's like that Gandhi quote about, right? I'd love to meet a Christian one day. I think people who really live religious lives, someone like Francis of Assisi, or say in our day, someone like Pope Francis, does change the world for the good. But there are other people who have used religion, just as evilly. In general, I would say that religion has been a moderating influence on some of our worst tendencies, our selfish tendencies, the golden rule, for example. But I would also say that, religion has been used to subjugate people, and religious wars in particular, where religion versus religion has actually led to, great suffering. I mean, for example, the foundations of a lot of anti-Semitism in Europe, which led to the Holocaust, were religiously based, right? And so it's a very complex question. And once again, it depends what you mean by religion and who you're talking about and how they live out their religion.
So is there some sort of moral place you can see us heading towards? Again, I'm on this arc concept here. In 10 years, something going on now that you say religion will be a good force in that, and in 10 years that'll be better.
Oh yeah, I mean I know I'm a little biased, but I think that, to be very specific, I think that Pope Francis's shift to a church that is more focused on mercy and compassion. I mean, that is his constant theme, right? And he
As
has,
opposed to blame and judgment.
well, yeah, and he has said specifically, I think that we have been talking too much about sexual morality, right? And I think, in a sense, everybody knows what the church teaches, and so I want to bring us back to the basics, which is more mercy, compassion, and desire for justice for the poor. And I think that if people actually put that into action, we'll be a lot better off. And he's not afraid to shake things up. The question is, again, and to your point, and I know you've raised this a couple of times. The question is, do we accept that or not? I mean, do we as individuals accept, that migrants and refugees have as much place, as anyone on the stage does, right? I mean, they're individuals who are desirous of something good. Or do we individually and as a community and as a nation reject that, right? So, I mean, that's the difficult thing, because we are sinful and selfish, and we have to work against those things.
Do you agree with, I mean, I can't see how you do, but Father, do you agree that the higher moral principle in the abortion debate is that women have autonomy versus a fetus?
I mean, that is a very,
I thought we left abortion in the last
Yeah,
before the
yeah,
break.
yeah.
But, okay.
Well, but it's look,
Okay.
this is gonna get cut out anyway. But
Yeah.
you're both moral authorities. You from a scientific point of view, you from a religious point of view. I assume you both feel like you can claim the higher moral principle from your point of view. So how does a layman like me go, yeah, he's right or he's right? Or in Whoopi's case,
well,
she's
but
right.
I think that's where your conscience comes in. I mean, it's not simply I know that old thing. It's not simply. I mean, in a sense, it's not simply sort of an imposition of rules from the outside. It's also your own conscience. I mean, one of the great things about the church that people, I think, forget about is this idea of the primacy of your conscience. Where, as one church document says, God's voice resounds in you, right? And so there's that too. And because we don't. And this is one of the things that Pope Francis is trying to remind us of. Life is not about black and white laws, right? There are black and white laws in some cases, yes or no laws. But in most cases, our lives are very gray. And so it's a development of the conscience and a development for the Christian. I mean, I'm sorry to focus on Christianity so much, on Jesus and an encounter with Jesus and seeing and noticing what he does and how he treats people. And so one moves from that.
The degree to which you agree with Pope Francis may certainly be genuine, but we should be reminded that he is your boss.
Yes, he is. That's right.
I want to be clear about that.
That's right.
I have a few comments to make on religion, and I'm reminded of Winston Churchill's comment about Americans. You can always count on Americans to do the right thing after they've tried everything else. And religion
I thought it was do the right thing eventually.
Eventually.
One of those, yeah, okay.
That was Spike Lee.
And you can't... And
do the right thing, yeah.
Oh, yeah. Religions do come around slowly. And so when the Father talks about we change our conscience, religions almost always lag behind by a decade or so or two from the culture that's already making the shift. Just think about interracial marriage. Remember when that was a thing? Yeah, me neither. In 1967, it was illegal in the United States. It was illegal. And now it's not. No one even talks about it anymore. In 1959, a poll showed that 96% of Americans were against interracial marriage. Now they don't even ask the question anymore.
Oh, no, they do.
Religions oppose... Oh, they do? Okay. Well, religions opposed interracial marriage. Now they don't. What happened? The culture shifted, and so the wave is like this, and religion is kind of coming up behind the wave, the surfer that catches it after it's already broke. That's my metaphor.
He lives in a surfing community now.
Yeah,
That's what it is.
yeah.
Yeah,
So,
Whoopi, what?
so is it, are we actually talking about morality, or are we actually talking about empathy?
Well,
Because-
I think they go together.
No, I'm not. I don't know if they do. That's why I'm asking. Because I think when you ask the question in 10 years, I think depending on how you educate your children, I grew up with Trick or Treat for UNICEF. And because I grew up with Trick or Treat for UNICEF and the chocolate bars that we sold, we were told this was helping children like us around the world.
You were selling chocolate bars to other children on Halloween? That's immoral.
No. That's immoral. But when I was a kid, I went to Catholic school. And so we would have these drives to raise money for the school and also to raise money for other communities.
And you bring home these few pennies, and that was your bit.
And if you did it for Halloween, you got a lot of money. You got those pennies. But see, people don't give pennies anymore. But we felt we had some hand in making the world better. And so I don't know if we thought of it as being moral. We just thought of it as doing the right thing to help the world. So do we actually just sort of whittle this down to empathy?
Well, that's a great question. Let me broaden it by asking,
How
do you teach this in schools? Can you teach morality in schools, even if it's this little exercise of a UNICEF collection?
I think it starts with parents, siblings, peers, and so on. It gets inculcated in culture. Most of the kinds of shifts we've been talking about have come more from the bottom up than the top down. Yes, you do need the laws passed. Sometimes you need the military to go in. But most of the time, it's just our language changes. If you look at literature from the 30s versus the 50s versus the 90s and so on, comic books, films, novels, all of it shifts. The words you use, the way you describe characters and all that. Just that moment when Ellen says on that show, into the microphone, I'm gay, or whatever word she said. Well, that was a big step. Now, 10 years later, Seinfeld makes a joke about, not that there's anything wrong with it. And now we laugh about it, and now it's just kind of commonplace, gay, whatever, dude, who cares? And that's how it kind of just it happens slow enough you don't really notice it. And the other problem is the media only covers the bad stuff. So for every act of violence, school shootings you see on TV, there's 10,000 acts of kindness every day that go unreported.
So going forward, should the religious leaders, the religious community, work with scientists to shape this moral arc? And it's one thing to say religion has lagged a decade behind or more, but religion has huge influence in the Western world, especially in the United States. So it's not something that should be discounted in its role in shaping society. So is there you or your counterparts reaching out? I know Carl Sagan did. Carl Sagan would have meetings with religious leaders just to talk about saving the world and how can that best be accomplished. So I have to presume, Father, that your very presence on the stage is a step in that direction to reach for scientists to find out what we're thinking and how and why.
Yeah.
That book was almost called "Who Cares You're Gay, Dude."
Are you suggesting, might there be a future of collaboration with what scientists, philosophers are thinking?
Well, yeah, I would think, I mean, there already is. I mean, in most sort of forward-thinking churches, and there's no fear, and there should be no fear of science. Well, I mean, they're both geared towards the truth, basically, and sort of unearthing the truth and helping us understand things better and understand the world better. And so,
in the latest encyclical, the Holy Father spoke at length about climate change.
oh, of course, right. And you know, it's interesting.
Well, not of course. Did you say like that?
Oh no, I know.
Okay.
Why of course for him?
I mean, because for him, but not
you know,
for religious leaders.
He is also
politicians to talk about it.
He is also a scientist. He was a chemist. You know, as a Jesuit, he studied chemistry and taught chemistry. Yes, hooray for chemists. And so, you know, and I think this the encyclical Laudato Si, which talks about climate change and the economy and the connection between the effects of the disproportionate effects of climate change on the poor. I mean, he links those things. He uses not only, you know, science qua science, but economics, right, in terms of helping us understand the world. So I think that's a really great example of a way that the church or a church can use things like science, climate change, economics to help us understand what is, I think, at heart, a moral document. It was funny. I was on this panel with Cardinal Turkson, who is cardinal from Ghana, and he was the one in charge of the encyclical Laudato Si. And he said, you know what? He said, this is not an encyclical about the climate. It is a social encyclical. It is about encyclical about society, right, and about our culture. And so that's a great example of how those two things can be brought together. And we have nothing to fear from that, nor should we. I mean, there's some people who do, but we shouldn't.
At least once a week, I ask myself, because as I see the landscape shifting under our feet, particularly if you're old fogies, you say, those young whippersnappers, I don't want to be that guy. So I'm trying to stay with it as things shift, and my kids are keeping me in touch. So I ask myself, I pose to my kids, I say, what do you think you're doing today where your kids will say, Mommy, Daddy, you are so out of it? And so I came up with one. I think I came up with one. I would say, there's at least a dozen or more sports in the Olympics that should not be segregated by gender, like archery and shooting and badminton, and but they are still segregated. I think there's a day when all these attentions will be focused on competitive sports.
Even why women's tennis? Why don't they play the same number of sets as men? They're just as fit. They can last just as long. It's just so ridiculous.
Right. I've forgotten about that. Right. They play three sets instead of five. Right. So there are things like that no one is focusing on yet, but it is a difference in that case between men and women baked into society on a level that we're not even recognizing because maybe there are too many other more important things we've got that are distracting us.
But you know, I think that's a great example. You can see the shift in how we look at football right now in terms of the brain injuries, right? And what that does to people who play. And maybe in a couple of years we'll say, how could we have ever allowed people to play in that particular way, football, if it was hurting their brains? And was that a form of exploitation of those people, particularly those young men?
Right.
So I agree that, and I think we have to start thinking about those things now.
Father, if we create a sentient robot, is it immoral to kill it?
Oh my gosh.
Okay, that's the next papal encyclical, I guess, right? Is that?
Wow. Can we talk about the eclipse instead?
No.
Well,
Yes.
Yes,
absolutely. Data is a person. Personhood is what we're talking. Sentience leads to personhood, which leads to rights. It's murder. Absolutely.
So who will judge that it's sentient?
I'll do it.
Okay.
If I pulled you from 50 years ago, from 20 years ago, and I just had you have a conversation with Siri, you would say that my device was sentient. And if I took a sledgehammer to it, you would then object. Yet
I
no
don't
one
know.
today is thinking Siri.
That's right. We have a little ways to go before this happens. So now's the time to be thinking about how should the law deal with that. Same with animals, higher primates and so on.
Higher, you value judging them.
Well, the criteria.
Just say yes, and
Yes.
you value judged it. Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
It's not higher or lower. They're all around today,
Yes.
evolved from the beginning of the family tree.
That's right.
Okay.
Yep. Yes. But I eat plants. And some meat.
Yeah.
But not much.
Like what? Like just like dumb ducks?
So the a subset of the vegetarian community sees eating animals as immoral, not just something for health or environment or whatever. Do you see that as
No,
coming?
yeah, and I've, as you were talking, I was thinking, I can imagine, I don't know, but I can imagine in 50 years people looking back and saying, I cannot believe people ate those animals. I cannot believe they killed them and raised them. I can see that. I'm not a vegetarian, but I can totally understand how someone could feel that, and I could understand in 50 years how that becomes law.
Well, let's not predict something so horrible.
Dead, so what are you worried about?
Why am I going to be dead? You don't know me. I could live to be 120. Yeah, that's the plan.
There is that generation who will be born where they will never die because they will always be available for the next thing that will prolong life.
Yes.
Isn't that immoral?
To live forever?
If you're living on a planet with limited resources, isn't
No,
that?
no, you explore outer space.
Yes.
Oh, there you
Where
go.
resources are unlimited. Let me ask each of you, just for some parting thoughts, we'll wrap this up before we go to Q&A. Why don't we end on the father? Let's start.
Really? You don't think that? I mean, he'll be something about like, love it up, lovers. But then I'll be like, in here as I've studied over the generations.
Okay, Eugene, what do you have for us? Just give me some summative thoughts. You can even reflect on what would morality look like in 100 years?
So is this Jerry's final moment?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
What will morality look like in 100 years? There will be, I think, unless we destroy ourselves.
Are you optimistic?
Say it again?
Are you optimistic?
I am. I think that it will be largely better. I do think that overall things get better and better. I think that football will either be significantly more violent or gone. And that's basically it. But I think overall, yeah, I think it'll be better. Hopefully, people still eat fish. Jesus, come on.
Yeah.
Sorry, I didn't mean it. Anyway.
And he did.
Michael.
Well, I've rarely been as frustrated in a conversation as I have been in this one. I think they're both full of shit. I think everything that you're saying is great and scientifically based, and I think everything you're saying is great. And I think that one nuclear bomb or one crazy person obviates all of it, and it doesn't matter what you're saying.
That's the power in the hands of those who are immoral.
Yeah, but I also think
Renders
that
moot the statements
of morality.
of those who are. Yeah.
Nothing inevitable about this.
Well, I didn't call on you yet.
Oh.
Okay. All right. So you're not optimistic about.
It's not that I'm not optimistic, but I don't feel like we've come any closer to solving the question of morality in this conversation. But I was mostly thinking about jokes the whole time.
So
agreed.
Other Michael.
It's not
Other
inevitable.
Michael.
It's not inevitable. The whole thing could go south. Absolutely.
Go south. That's a value judgment of
But
this direction.
all the more reason that to keep working.
You pass
on,
moral judgment on the South in that sentence.
Sorry. Things could go north really fast. We end up in Canada because of global warming.
Yeah,
Right?
yeah,
Then
we-
they're going to build that wall and make us pay for it. Anyway, so.
The Canadians building the wall, making us pay for it. I
It's
got that.
3 steps forward, 2 steps back. We have to keep chipping away at it and working at it. And in part, science and technology is part of the solution. Synthetic meat, we are getting there. Within a few decades, we won't need factory farms anymore. You can just grow it and make it a profitable thing for companies, and we'll have burgers and steaks that are just as marbled and tasty. And oh boy,
But isn't there also the argument that
I didn't
cows?
ask you.
I know, but the cows will go extinct if we do that.
The what?
The cows will go extinct if we do that, or close. to it.
well,
Unless you can make cows your pets, That's the only place you'll find cows is in India. Yeah.
Right. So isn't that
It's likely.
Yeah, so-
The cow only exists for that purpose. They still use them for milk, I guess.
Yeah.
So one final,
Butter?
Yeah, and butter. Yeah, milk, butter, cheese, all milk products.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So technology. And then I agree, Neil, I think in the last chapter of The Moral Arc, I speculated on us becoming a multi-planetary spacefaring civilization in which there's no more nation states either. Nation states is a temporary stage in human history. Cities are the oldest structures we have, the oldest collective organizations we have. There are cities that are thousands of years old. There are no nations that are thousands of years old. The borders change. These will come and go. Once you just open the borders up and let people do whatever they want to do, then there'll be more freedom and autonomy, and this will reduce the chances of nuclear war and things like that. So I'm optimistic.
Optimistic. Okay. And just one note, in Martin Luther King's I Have a Dream speech, there's a very significant moment where he speaks of the moral arc bending towards righteousness. So
Justice, yes.
Justice, yeah,
Yes,
moral arc
yeah.
bends towards justice. Whoops.
Yeah.
What you got for us? I know you got something, don't you?
I don't know
Make
what
it
I
up,
got
right?
for you. You know, I think that it is incumbent upon us all as individuals to decide who we are morally. Whether it's inbred in you or, these are things that come to you because of your experiences, what you learn, what you know, who's taught you, what you believe, what you've come to believe. And I think that those are important things. And you can put it in science and you can put it in God and whatever it is, it's still you. You have to decide morally what and who you're going to be. And, you can blame it on God or blame it on science, but when it comes down to it, it's your choice, I think. But that's just me. What I know. I smoke too much weed.
The Jesuit James, what do you have for us?
I smoke just as much, probably.
I know. I know. That's why they put us together.
Not recently, though. No, I mean, I would agree. I would agree with that and say, it's up to the individual. I would also say it's up to us as a community. And so in terms of where we're going, I'll try not on a positive note, but I think that the last 2 years have made me not optimistic. The last 2 years, I think that, at least in the United States, that we've gotten angrier and more divided and more coarsened. And I think you could make the argument worldwide, too, in general. But I would say that as a Christian, I'm hopeful. But it's up to us. I mean, it is a choice. I mean, and it is a moral choice whether or not we're going to, be generous or not. So I'm not optimistic, but I remain hopeful.
I'd like to offer us just some. I'm an astrophysicist, so that's the lens through which I view the world, for better or for worse. A bit of this that we lost a little bit track of from the beginning was the sense of cooperation and how morality feeds into the survival of a community, and not only the survival, but whether or not it thrives. And so when I think of the reasons people have fought wars, many of them, if not most, have been access to limited resources. Many other wars fought on the premise of one religion versus another. When you part the curtains, again, it's access to resources, either natural resources or land itself. So when I think of space, in fact, has unlimited resources. There are ingredients on Earth called rare earth elements. It's an entire row of the periodic table that are fundamental to modern electronics. And most of those are in China. And so that's kind of interesting. So that's a limited resources. By the way, there are asteroids that are primarily made of metal that have an abundance of rare earth elements. An abundance of iridium, platinum, gold, silver, copper. So in the future, let's go 100 years, 1,000 years into the future, it's possible that we can remove war over limited resources, we can remove that incentive entirely if we have access to the unlimited resources of space. Not only mineral resources, but energy resources. Wars have been fought over energy. And so when I see this, I add to this fact that the Hubble telescope, the most productive scientific instrument there ever was, responsible for 20,000 research papers, with collaborators in every country in which you find an astrophysicist. Wait, what word did I use? Collaborators. Do you know the International Space Station is the greatest collaboration of nations outside of the waging of war that there ever was? The Olympics and the World Cup are a distant second and third to that. The scientific community, and especially astrophysicists, because our targets of interest are up there, and up there is not divided by national boundary or religion or by who's in charge. Up there is space, and it's over everybody's head. And so when we study the universe, I'll pull out a telescope, I look here, somebody in another country also looks at that object, and we compare notes. We are scientific colleagues. We publish papers together. It may be that the future of morality is rolled up in what it takes to get along. And what I know firsthand is that when you do science, you get along. You get along because the object of your affection sits outside of ourselves. It's a higher purpose, a higher goal to understand the nature of this universe in which we live. So I foresee in the centuries to come, if space becomes accessible to us, I see a time where we will only know peace and look back at a time when people killed one another because of our differences, and we said, my gosh, how could that have ever happened? Because today we celebrate one another because of our differences. And that is a cosmic perspective coming to you from StarTalk. Join me in thanking Father James Martin, Whoopi Goldberg, Michael Shermer, Michael Ian Black, Eugene Mirman, the Eugene Mirman Comedy Festival. This has been StarTalk. We have been live at the King's Theater in Brooklyn, and you've been an amazing audience. Thank you all, and good night.
Before we go, I just want to thank Wix. From simple landing pages to complex professional websites, Wix has you covered. No need to hire a web developer. If I was able to build this for StarTalk, certainly you can build your site with Wix. The editor gives you full design freedom. Freedom! It's like that. That was my Braveheart Wix thing. Oh, never mind. They have apps that let you grow your business. They have unlimited fonts. Everything just works. It's like magic. No, it's like science. Head to the link in the description and start your site today. That's wix.com/go/StarTalk.